again, as is the case with Zoom. Thank you everyone for joining us. I'm Aislin O'Connor with the San Francisco OBA. We're happy to have another speaker talk about some really exciting developments that are transforming their current industry right now. We're running this in conjunction with the Los Angeles OBA, and we hope to continue to be able to do these regularly while we're still under the shelter-in-place order. We're open for questions right after this, but we're going to start with a dialogue with Matthew Delahaye, who is the CEO and co-founder of Inploi, which was founded in 2014 and has continued to make some really exciting progress since then. And I'll leave Matt to introduce Inploi and tell you a little bit about it.
Cool. Hey, Aislin. Thanks a lot for having me. Hi, everybody. It's 2:07 a.m. in the UK right now, so I've had to get tuning in late at night. Yeah, I'll run. Inploi is a project that came out of my side entrepreneurship program, actually. But I'll run you through what we're doing, and then look forward to having to chatting a bit more about it with you, Aislin. So Inploi. So we build Inploi as the future of online recruitment and job discovery for the blue collar workforce. And I think of particular relevance now, the argument we've been making for a long time is that this is a workforce who has been underserved by technology, and particularly given the current situation we're in, I think it's becoming more and more apparent who the real essential workers of our labour force are. And we've built Inploi as a platform, to bring best-in-class technology to these industries to help people looking for work to find and access job opportunities, and people looking for staff to be able to reach them, on the platforms of today. And, reach this conclusion having been, frankly, been a student and trying to find a job at the time in hospitality during the vacations, and was astounded, along with my co-founder, by how difficult that experience was. You ended up printing out a paper CV and walking down the street, and, literally handing it into stores, or looking for a shop with a sign in the window saying, help needed, or going onto, a job board, a Craigslist-style jobs platform, kind of, one iteration up from a sign outside the post office in the name, and firing off 100 applications via email with a resume attached, never hearing back from anybody, and we were just astounded by how shocking this was. So we came to look at the problem more broadly, and realized that that problem had been solved in a handful of industries, with sectors, particularly for white-collar knowledge workers, by platforms like LinkedIn, like AngelList in tech, like the Dots in the UK for creatives, Zing in the German-speaking countries. But nobody had applied that model to the much bigger, historically termed blue-collar workforce, and people who are typically paid by the hour, with relatively unstable employment contracts. Frequently labor turnover is incredibly high, so people move jobs a lot more frequently, and the majority of the workforce, those people sit and work in that big blue bubble, and a result of that is that they have no online professional presence yet. At best, they exist as a CV in some resume database somewhere that a recruiter is buying access to and calling up, but that might have been there for 5 years. There's no dynamic online professional presence for a lot of these people. So we set out to build that thing. As I said, the result of that is particularly exacerbated by high levels of turnover. It's too difficult for companies to find the people that they need to hire, and for people to access the information and the job opportunities they need to make an employment decision. And that inefficiency costs people, particularly at the bottom of society, where an extra week or two on your job search is the difference between being able to make rent. That inefficiency is exacerbated by shoddy tech. So we've built a platform, that is striving to fix those problems for workers. We built ourselves as the new standard in online job search and company discovery, and professional networking. So we provide people with a beautiful online profile. They can upload a profile video to introduce themselves, particularly relevant in kind of customer-facing roles in hospitality or retail. They can upload a gallery of images, which was a feature that chefs particularly were interested in. So that when asked, how did you find a job, they say, well, we use our Instagram account. So adding in visual features there. And then also any experience that they have, they can receive skills endorsements from their peers or from past employers. And then you use the platform to search for job opportunities. You can connect with peers. You can follow companies to receive updates when they post new opportunities. And having a profile on there means that you can be reached out to proactively by employers who are looking to hire. On the flip side of that, we have companies who are signing up and they're creating a company page that is an opportunity for them to stand out from a crowd of many others in a competitive market, to explain to the candidate, a job seeker, why someone should come and work for you. What is your culture like? Again, rich media, and as I mentioned, candidates, job seekers can start to follow those pages so that employers invest time in these and build a community around their brand. They can then create job listings, which go out on to the Inploi platform and to our website and app, but then also are bundled up with all of the bells and whistles and shot off across the internet to a bunch of other platforms that we're integrated with or that we have partnerships with. We're one of 2 companies in the UK to have a direct integration with jobs on Facebook. So all the roles go out there automatically. They go out to job aggregators, which are these big search engines for jobs. And then we run specific targeted social media campaigns. Part of the value add for us is the job platforms that workers here are using haven't changed very much since the late 90s. Craigslist made $1 billion on job listings last year, and it doesn't. You all know what that is like. If you are an employer looking to reach the future of your workforce, you need to be on the platforms that they're using and using the tech that they're familiar with. So we help them to reach those people. So we founded, started working on Inploi in 2015, I guess. Really kind of quit our jobs and dived in 2016, and have had some relative success since then. It's taken us a while to figure out exactly what the product needed to be, and that is still constantly evolving. But along the way, we've built a really sharp piece of technology. We've developed some powerful strategic partnerships. I mentioned with Facebook. We're also partnered with Deliveroo in the UK to provide the platform to their restaurant partners and to the people working in those. We've partnered with the Grosvenor Group, who are a big a land sort of estate agency essentially, and employers packaged up to all of their retail tenants as a service they can use. And then we've worked very hard to build offline partnerships with training providers and education institutions so that we can work with people looking for work straight out of training. They can come onto Inploi, they can create a profile. The idea is that they would then use that profile to find their first job, but then carry us with them through their career as they move around between different employers and use the platform to find new and better opportunities. We've got a handful of new first customers. I think we might come to talk about this, but as a marketplace, we thought it was a smart idea to focus on a particular vertical to maximize the chances of supply and demand meeting each other. That the vertical we picked was hospitality, because that's where we had experienced the problem and where terrible technology was everywhere and labor turnover was incredibly high. In London, up to 300% per annum for high street stores, which means some companies are changing their entire workforce 3 times a year. So it was an acute pain point for us to dive in. That is, we're having to change pretty quickly on the fly, because hospitality as a sector has come to a grinding halt. But we may come to talk about that. We've got over 100,000 users signed up, using the platform to find jobs. We've kind of tested our model and our pricing, and we've won some awards along the way. So we were chosen as one of the UK's top 100 startups recently. We were selected as the best newcomer at the Global Recruiter Awards, and a few others. So that's a kind of highline run through of what we're up to and what Inploi is. But happy to start discussing with you.
Thank you, Matt, for the overview. And I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Matt is dialing in from the UK, so it's up very early, and we thank him for doing that, along with Hannah and John from SBS as well too, who have gotten up very early to facilitate this evening for us. Very interesting, very impressive, Matt. Can you tell us a little bit? You started with hospitality, and it sounds like it makes sense to have started in recruitment in that space, because it sounds like it's been an underserved market for a long time. Prior to this pandemic that's happened right now, what were you seeing in that space, and what were you seeing as some of the changes compared to when you first started 5 years ago?
Yeah, so I'm best equipped to speak to the labour market in the UK, because that is where the majority of our operations have been. But I think some of the themes will be universal. That market in the UK was supply constrained. There were not enough workers to fill the jobs, which meant companies were very keen to find a solution for that. They were also by and large filled by around 50% of the workforce is not from the UK. So a lot of immigrants working there. So Inploi has been a really attractive solution to companies looking for new ways to reach out to those people. Almost overnight, recruitment and staffing and the demand for labor in that sector dropped to zero. So suddenly, there's been a kind of complete shift in the poles from that regard, because one, demand from companies has dropped off completely, but there is now also huge. The hospitality is the UK's fourth largest employer. A little over 3 million people work there in the sector. Retail is of a similar size. So you suddenly had these two very large industries. Demand for labor dropped to zero. At the same time, there was a massive shift in demand from things like supermarkets or delivery drivers. So we have, as a result, kind of accelerated plans that had been in the works already to essentially open up the platform significantly before we had intended to additional industries, in an attempt to try to start and facilitate the movement of labor from these places where demand has now gone off a cliff to places where there is excess demand.
Have you seen anecdotally that any of the workers that were, say, in those hospitality jobs are now shifting to, say, a supermarket or some of these other roles that you're staffing?
Yeah, exactly. So there is a lot of the markets that we've been looking at. The labor dynamics are pretty similar, and in a bunch of these roles, the skills are quite transferable. Whether you're been working as a waiter in a restaurant, you suddenly can go and be a front of house person in a store, or you can go and work in an Amazon warehouse. I think in the UK we've seen a particular demand from agriculture. The harvest is coming around. The majority of those workers are historically from the EU, partly because of travel bans, partly because of kind of change in sentiment that those workers are just not coming, to the extent that some of the contractors have had to charter planes to fly Romanian workers in. So there are, we have stories of people who have kind of been a waiter, been retrenched, got a job as a strawberry picker, and is it's having to do that. But I think interestingly, there certainly seems to have been a real sea change in public opinion about migrant workers, because suddenly, oh my gosh, we really, really need them. And I think that may be coming out of this, a big societal change will be a reevaluation of our appreciation of who, the quote unquote, kind of the essential workers of society are. Actually, we couldn't do without people who quite wrongly have frequently been called like low-skilled workers. Actually, we're completely stuffed without them. So potentially, I hope, and we're obviously advocating for a positive outcome of this, could be and should be sort of a rewriting of the social contract, where we come to appreciate the roles and the work that these people do in society to keep the whole bloody system working.
That is a very interesting take. And before we did this evening, I took a quick browse of Inploi and some of the updated categories you have, and it was interesting that you had some healthcare workers in there as well too.
Yeah, so we've obviously had our kind of direct software subscribers, users on the hospitality side. We're now working. We're kind of in the midst of the grand pivot, expansion into these other sectors, but on the way to doing so, we still want to be able to provide content to job seekers so that they are able to use Inploi to find jobs wherever they may be. So as a kind of as a stopgap on the way to getting there, we've built a bunch of smart tools that are now essentially scraping the internet for job opportunities wherever they may be, whether that's on a company's careers page, or whether that is on a kind of a separate job board, and we're pulling all of those together. We're enriching those jobs with information about a company, so that a candidate or a job seeker is able to learn more about what a potential employer is like, whether that's pulling reviews from elsewhere or their company's house data, and then presenting that on the site, so you can essentially now search for any role that is available within these sort of expanded kind of hands and feet sectors that we're looking at.
Very interesting. Do you think that long term that's going to lead to more transparency and more, essentially, for lack of a better word, data for hands and feet workers, which typically wasn't available, where the white collar version of it would probably be glassdoor.com or something similar?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's kind of our intention completely. Is there is a lot of these markets are pretty opaque when it comes to what is out there. People are frequently, not English may not be their first language, or they may be kind of a recent arrival to the UK, or effectively any country where we will be operating. There's a real lack of transparency when it comes to sort of what you should be getting paid, but also what other opportunities are out there. So we, as a cornerstone, Inploi is meant to be a place where you can come to find this information, but where you can then start to benchmark and at scale. We hope it will be a tool that will then force employers to pay better, to treat their staff better, and to be a better employer, because the workers are now more aware and have greater access to other opportunities. So if you don't, they'll go somewhere else where 25 of their peers have worked and said it was a great place to go. So hopefully we can pull things out that way as well.
Good. And then when you were going through your slides, you have some really high profile partnerships and clients right now. Like I saw Caprice Holdings was there, some hotel chains. what are your predictions? They can be unofficial predictions as well too. At the high end of the market that you're already working with hospitality, how recruitment will change later on once we're all through this crisis.
Yeah, so I think hospitality is going to be probably the last sector to kind of reopen up as social distancing is maintained for quite a long time, and the last place, one from a kind of medical perspective where you want to be kind of all together is in a restaurant, but I think mentally as well, it's going to take a while for people to come back around to thinking that is a good idea, whether or not that takes a vaccine to happen or otherwise, or whether the covers in a restaurant are going to be cut in half so that you can be the requisite distance away from diners. We've seen a handful of places. Some carried on doing it. Some are starting to reopen one or two sites in order to do deliveries. So obviously people are at home, Deliveroo, Uber Eats and others are booming. So a bunch of sites are kind of opening up, opening up their kitchens to do that. But I think, I don't know the answer to this, and I'm interested to see is there are huge numbers of the workforce have been furloughed. There are indications that the hospitality sector may have a kind of extended furlough, but there will come a time when the state is going to stop paying people's wages, and it will be interesting to see if that lines up with when demand and footfall is back up, or whether a diminished number of people are going to get their jobs back, and even more are going to join the ranks of the unemployed or the fresh job seekers.
Very interesting. How have you seen, you've talked a lot about the changing dynamics and how essentially it sounds like there was almost an on-off switch with this particular sector. Can you share any differences in terms of current user behavior on the platform right now compared to 2 months ago?
So, we're obviously seeing a lot of interest in jobs that are available, because I don't know the numbers in the States offhand, but in the UK, there have been over 1 million increased claims to the job seekers allowance. That's a large number of people now in the job market trying to find opportunities. But that isn't necessarily translating through to people actually taking work, which I find is interesting. There's a big push at the moment to get people to go and work on farms, as I mentioned, because the harvest is coming up. One of the big farming groups, I think, received 50,000 applications.
Wow.
They sent out 8,000 job offers, and only 200 people accepted them. Now, that kind of is emblematic of a broader behavioural trend we've seen in the UK job market, where historically a lot of those jobs, historically a lot of those jobs will have been filled by immigrants, which is why that result is why they're having to fly people in from Eastern Europe. I don't know if that is a result of kind of the incentives of the furlough scheme, or otherwise, but we're seeing massive interest in positions. We have limited data on the final step in that, because we're not involved in the employment relationship at all. We're the platform that connects them. But we're seeing massive increases in traffic and application volume through the platform to places where there are now jobs, particularly from people who our users have been hospitality sector workers who are out of a job.
Very interesting. We have, everything is related, and a lot of countries have similarities. We haven't had as widely in the press the agricultural issues here in the U.S. It's very interesting to hear.
Yeah. I wonder, we don't do any. I think a lot of those employers tend to be, certainly in the US, kind of labor brokers, really, where you have somebody who sends in stuff. And we started out as a gig economy platform, actually. That was we were gonna be those guys, but at the time, a lot of money was pouring into the gig sector, and we were not convinced that this was the inevitable end to the world of work, and really at the bottom of society, or at the bottom of the labor pool, this idea that the gig economy is a wonderful provider of flexibility. Actually, I think it is a way people end up piecing together a bunch of different insecure employment to try and emulate having a full-time job. And the benefits of that are very heavily skewed in favor of employers. So we kind of took a step back from that and said, philosophically, we have some problems with it, but actually, at the same time, a lot of employers are looking to hire part and full-time staff, and nobody was looking at that problem, which is kind of how we veered away from the kind of contract space.
Very interesting. In purely out of curiosity, the competitors that you came across when you were focusing more on the gig economy, how are they faring now? Are they still in the market? Are they still active? Do you know anecdotally how they've fared right now, or even prior to this?
So I mean, beforehand, there was a lot of venture capital had gone into gig economy platforms, and the majority of them are still blowing through that. So on the outside, it seems great, but the technology has not been great for many of them, and hospitality happened, hospitality and retail, for the most part, were the sectors that they were operating in. So I don't know personally the state of what's going on within any of the main companies, but I can imagine that their revenue has fallen off a cliff as well.
Interesting. And then you mentioned too that there were companies in that space in particular that had a lot of venture capital money thrown at them. Segueing a little bit from focusing on what you see some of the changes in the recruitment industry overall, how do you see some of the changes going forward with the way that you run your business right now in this climate?
Yeah, so I mean, we took a kind of a decision pretty early on to a plan for the absolute worst and assume that this was going to be really, really bad. From the point of departure that if it wasn't, we wouldn't regret having done that, and if it was, the worst thing to be would be to look back and say, well, if only we'd taken these decisions 2 months earlier. So we sat the team down and had a pretty frank conversation and kind of said, based on these assumptions, if we are going to all have a job by the end of this, or if we need to do X and Y and Z, which involves everybody taking a pretty serious pay cut. We furloughed a bunch of a number of members of the team. I believe there is a similar scheme in the States, but the UK government has agreed to pay up to 80% of the salaries, up to a ceiling of £2,500, of any workers who are basically parked until business can resume some normal level of activity. So we've taken steps to extend our runway as far as possible. On the one hand, on the other hand, we kind of proactively lent into assuming hospitality as a vertical, as a sector, doesn't really recover until early 2021 or even mid 2021, or maybe never the same again. What does our business look like? And those are the kind of changes that I mentioned earlier on, that we sort of accelerated into opening the platform up to additional industries, opening it up to additional geographies, and starting to acquire jobs from a bunch of other sources, so that we have a lot of content on the site, because it's the content on the platform that is users are engaging with, that is what we are, is what is indexed, is what we is the pool for candidates, and that growing body of candidate users who are creating profiles, who are connecting with each other, who are following companies, and who are ultimately applying for jobs is the incentive in part for us, in addition to a bunch of the software that we have to go to a company and say, you should really be using Inploi to hire, to publish your vacancies and to hire staff, because there is this large and growing community of job seekers who are looking to work with people like you.
Very interesting. We have some questions from our attendees, and Michael's has a few questions, and he wanted to know, is the challenge primarily for you getting candidates or clients to the site, or depending on which, how are you attracting users right now?
So, the answer is it's both. This is Inploi as a marketplace business. We've grappled with the chicken and the egg problem of building that, where the utility of the platform to the one side is entirely dependent on the presence of the other side, and vice versa. When we started out, we did a bunch of to quote Paul Graham, things that don't scale. Whether that was go to a restaurant and say, hey, we've got all of these candidates looking for jobs through our platform. You should publish your vacancies, and then they do it, and then we'd go to those job boards and buy a bank of CVs and call them up and say, hey, this restaurant is really interested in your profile, but they're hiring through Inploi, so you need to create a profile. So we did a bunch of things like that to get off the ground. As kind of part of our candidate acquisition strategy, we've built a pretty comprehensive, we call it growth engine, where in order to try and overcome that chicken and the egg problem, and to grow the market asynchronously, we've built the system. So a company will sign up and post a job opportunity. That goes out to we now need to, one, derive a bunch of applications for that. Those will come in part from our existing job seekers, our existing users, who will get that via an email alert or a push notification, or through browsing the site. But in order to top that up with additional applications, we then send that job out to platforms like Azuna or Nuvu, or other kind of job search engines. They're called aggregators, where we will bid for traffic on a cost per click basis. We send those out to jobs on Facebook, so relevant people with relevant experience or relevant stated job preferences will get a notification about that. Because of that partnership, they can complete an application via the Facebook platform, which also creates an Inploi profile, and they have single sign-on to our platform to continue kind of that journey. We run a bunch of targeted digital marketing, across the app stores, and using Google, Facebook, and Instagram to grow the candidate pool. But the thesis in the long term is that at scale, so let's assume we need to supply. If somebody posts a job, we need to supply 30 applications for them to make a hire. For example, the numbers there vary significantly across roles, but say it's 20, say it's 30. A proportion of those will come from existing users who already signed up on Inploi, who have a profile, and then so say 15 will come from there. We then need to find another 15 from somewhere else, and that's where we the growth engine kicks in, and we start spending to acquire users and applications. But because of the profiles, because of all of the other kind of features built to drive engagement with the platform, and ongoing engagement and stickiness, in time and as we scale, the thesis is that fewer and fewer applications will have to come from outside the community. So as we get bigger, our variable cost of supplying applications to a job tends towards zero because they come organically. So we've kind of figured out that to an extent. On the company side, we look at that as pretty much software enterprise sales. We get people on board for a trial. We'll pitch them, they'll try out the platform, and that is for the most part still pretty manual. We get a lot of referrals, organic sign-ups who we then follow up with. We haven't done a huge amount of digital marketing or kind of paid marketing on the company side because we've got a handful of quite big customers who've signed up and have had our hands full with those.
And some other questions is, for clarification, do you act as a networking platform only, or do you plan to facilitate the interview process in a similar way that a recruitment company would?
Yeah, so it's a lot more than networking type. So if you're a candidate signing up, you complete your profile that sits at employ.com/Matthew Delahaye. It is, you can set the visibility on that, but it is accessible within the platform for company, and you use that to apply and to engage. For employers, you post the jobs, you then receive all applications into your kind of back end, which is basically an applicant management platform. So you have Trello-like drag and drop pipelines where you can move people through a process. All of the applications are in the apply column. You browse through the profiles. You connect with those you like, or you kind of advance them through a stage. Once you have connected with them, that opens up a set of communication tools. Chats. We have chat, voice, and video calling built into the platform. There is meeting scheduling as well. There is bulk messaging. You can set message templates so that you can kind of, say you are hiring a lot of people. You can connect with all of the ones who have particular characteristics, for example, and schedule a meeting or schedule an interview, conduct that through the Inploi platform itself. But we don't have any involvement in the kind of post the employment. We have nothing to do with the employment relationship. So we're the platform that facilitates connecting these two parties. We aim to give them as much information as possible about each other, and then give them the tools to communicate with each other. But that's where we stop.
The video chat, did you have that as a feature prior to right now? Because that's something we're seeing across a lot of different businesses, is the facilitation of video chat, where it wasn't a common feature before.
So we had, we had a version before, and the reason for that was looking through the chat logs. A lot of people be saying, hey, I'm a chef, I've applied. Well, our chef's applied for a job, and the employer will say, great, can you come in for an interview? And they'll say, actually, I'm in Greece until next week, Saturday. Can we just chat via Skype? Great, here's the Skype address, great. And then they drop off the platform. So we built that in. I think that is going to become a feature that is a lot more relevant, in the kind of COVID-19 and post-COVID-19 world, where potentially for a while we actively seek to minimize external interactions with people as much as possible. So I'm not going to get on a train for an hour to come and meet you, to interview, to be your waiter. Actually, let's just do that via Skype, or via Inploi now. So I definitely see that being a feature that is used a lot more.
We have a question from Susanna is, are you offering users reputable training resources or leaving information in addition to the platform itself to position themselves with more opportunity in an uncertain job market?
Yeah, absolutely. So, there are two strands to that. Very, immediately now, we send a lot of communications out to our kind of candidate users about the various job seeker schemes that are available. The furloughing scheme, is your employer stealing your money by not paying you and claiming it from the government. How do I go about claiming the benefit that's available if you've been ill? Basically just information and resources that are meant to be helping people at a difficult time. More generally, we have partnerships with a bunch of training providers, whether that's kind of training people providing training courses, or colleges and schools who we work with to get information from to people looking for work. So if for example, if you apply for a barista job and you don't get it, and you've requested feedback, and the feedback provided is, well, you didn't have any barista experience in your profile, we could say, well, here are 5 kind of colleges or training providers that we vetted and we know are decent. You might like to do a course so that you stand a better chance the next time around.
Do you know if any of those training providers have moved any of their trainings online?
I'm afraid, off the top of my head, I don't at this time.
Not a problem. It's something I haven't thought of before.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of sort of phase 3 or 4 or 5 of this is we really want to build, or at least partner or integrate with, an online kind of training platform, so that candidates or job seekers or members of the community can, a bit like LinkedIn did with can't remember what they're called, but people are able to do a course through the platform. When they complete it, that
like
that certification, Linda, yeah, exactly, yeah. Then that is affixed to your profile. It has the kind of double benefit for us of making the profile more valuable to a candidate, but it also then makes them more employable to an employer. So the likelihood of them having a successful experience using Inploi is excuse me, is a lot more likely.
And we have another question about cross-border applications. Do you see cross-border applications when the COVID-19 situation is resolved? I think what I understand yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, yes, and the vision has always been and remains to be like, I want to get on, for example, to be coming for a gap year from Australia to the UK, and for them to be able to sign up in Sydney and arrive in the UK and have 3 interviews lined up. We've already seen a little bit of that happening anecdotally. And there's a guy called Christoph who made the most fantastic profile video, which is why we kind of found him. But he was Finnish, came out of the army, worked on a reindeer ranch in like the hospitality section, wanted to move to the UK, found Inploi via Google, signed up, made a profile, applied for a position at a Young's pub, got an EasyJet flight over, went to the pub, did the interview, got the job, moved to the UK. I was in Spain in a simpler time last summer, and was in some really random little village on the frontier called Vejer de la Frontera, and ended up chatting to the waiter, and he said, "Oh yeah, you went to Oxford. I spent 6 months of the year working in Cowley." We want Inploi to be the platform that facilitates the movement of those people between opportunities, between countries, and there's definitely big particular applications for this in a country like Germany, where there is a severe shortage of labor, particularly in kind of the automotive and the manufacturing sectors, where, as opposed to like Southern Europe, where there is large levels of unemployment. We want to be able to help kind of bridge that gap and equalize the supply and demand relationship there. So that's a long answer. It's like, yes, absolutely see cross-border applications. and are keen to explore those opportunities.
Would you, because the European Union has some differences from the United States, would you see the closest in the US being a cross-state opportunity where someone, say, lives in Colorado and applies for a job?
Definitely. I mean, yeah, the States is so big, and the States are so kind of, it's basically Europe with the same language. So we're not really, we're not in the States yet. I think we're about to try some experiments, with this kind of slightly adapted model where we can find jobs from other places and see what happens. But I can definitely see that that would happen cross states rather than internationally for people in the US, and it's easier in Europe because of the right to work that is available within the Schengen area.
And we have a question for Sarah, and she's asking what advice you would give to young entrepreneurs starting out, and what was a major challenge for you when starting out and launching Inploi, and how did you overcome that?
What advice would I give to young entrepreneurs starting out? You won't regret spending more time really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And I say that because we started out and we were in such a hurry, and we just wanted to go and work and build and And I think if we were on the tail end, we would have saved time, but coming to understand a bunch of things that we subsequently learned along the way. So do your homework. Really understand the problem, and be sure of the opportunity. I think that was the other thing. We were pretty sure about Inploi, but needed to survive, so had jobs on the side had worked on Inploi on the side whilst working on the jobs we had at the time, till we got to a point at which we were sufficiently convinced that there really is an opportunity here, and we're prepared to put all of our own time into that, and prepared to ask other people for their money to build it. I think you need to reach that level of conviction, and don't hurry that. Major challenge starting out. I mean, it was really just one of the biggest challenges was actually just starting out. Was okay, I'm going to quit my job, and I am going to really put my neck on the line. It's a bold statement to be I'm going to start a company. Never done it before. Don't really know what I'm doing, but it's a good idea, and I think it's going to work. So yeah, let's do it. That was a really scary thing to do. So overcoming that and just doing it to steal from Nike is a big challenge. And then figuring out what it is you need to do. I think the one thing the MBA side prepared me relatively well, particularly well for, was being able to manage complexity. You are having to do so much in so many wearing so many different hats, whether that's writing a contract or registering a company or figuring out how to run a Google Ads campaign, or and there are so many things to be managing and spinning at the same time. I think a challenge is figuring out how to pay attention to the right things, and to leave to not waste time with stuff that doesn't matter. What else? I think get good advisors is paramount. And I've been super surprised, not anymore, but by how willing people are to help. There is power in just asking the question, and senior people in any industry are remarkably receptive if you reach out and say, look, I'm I'm thinking of doing this, or I am doing this, and based on your experience, I'd love to sit you down for a coffee, or would you mind if we had a call, or however you want to approach it. And people are very willing to help, and that's a great way to build. Well, it's a great way to network anyway, but it's a great way to build relationships with people who may become kind of more established or kind of longer term advisors. But it's also a great way to start relationships with people who will become investors.
Very interesting. Another question is, it's a brand new question. You have a unique name. How did you come up with your
name? That's really funny. So we were initially called Work Match because we were matching people to work, and registered. I thought it was a great name. We had a nice logo. Registered a trademark kind of a week before that was due to register, due to be published. Well, due to finalize. We got this kind of large official letter from some named law firm, and there was this Danish, some Scandinavian company called, doesn't matter, who was threatening to sue us for whatever and whatever. So we were not far enough in we were not far along in the end to actually think that we were ever going to do anything about that. So we kind of it would have cost us, I think it cost us £600 to rebrand at the time, as opposed to probably thousands of pounds, which we didn't have anyway, to say, actually, we're going to keep our name. So so then we just drew down lists and lists and lists of names that we thought could be applicable. At one time, Turtle, spelled Turtl, was the front runner, which very, very glad that went out the window. But it was it's remarkably difficult to get a name that it makes sense or is relevant to what you're trying to do, that you can get a good domain name for, or for which the domain is available, and which is not trademarked. Initially we were Inploi.me, and I've traced the register via the kind of Whois registry that Inploi.com was a dormant domain registered to somebody somewhere in the east coast of the States who had thought about using it for a library company, and then had never done anything with it. So reached out to her via Twitter, and managed to get her to give us Inploi.com. And yeah, so that was around. So yeah, and Inploi was one of the names on that list, and it was kind of independent was the in, and emploi, as in French for working, was the ploy, and then we mashed them together and we got Inploi. And it kind of fitted what we were doing. Loved the symmetry of the eyes, and here we are.
That's a good story.
Thank you. Well, we could be Turtle, so thank God that was avoided.
If we have any questions, we can type them in the chat, and then I'd also too, because we want to facilitate this as just as an open conversation. If anyone wants to get up on their screen and ask questions, please go ahead. Now, I think you might need to stop sharing your screen is the only thing for that. And it can be about anything too, questions. If anyone wants to make an introduction, ask for any networking help, any ideas.
Otherwise, I can go to bed.
Well, otherwise, you can go to bed. Here, we have another question is, how did you come and select your entrepreneur partners in the early stages?
So my co-founder, I was staying on his floor in London. So I had been at Stellenbosch University in South Africa, actually with Alex Hansen-Smith is my co-founder, with his brother. And yeah, I was doing my kind of MBA internship, and was staying at their at their house on the sofa, and I think we'd been out for dinner and we're having a few beers, and I was talking about how I was thinking really hard about doing this thing that I've been working on. And Alex said, that sounded really interesting. He had similar experiences to me, kind of pertaining to the problem, so kind of appreciated that what it was. And we kind of just said, yeah, why not? Which in hindsight was a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. Thankfully, it turned out to be a great idea in that it has been and is an amazing co-founder. But I did not have enough information at all at that time to make that decision. And had he not been a great co-founder, we would have been absolutely effed. So the moral of the story is, I think you really need to know you really need to know somebody really well before founding a company with them. The amount of stress and the situations you will go through, and the kind of requirement, the expectation of each other's time to work hard, at least as hard as you, is not to be balked at. And I think you really can't know that about somebody, and that you either roll the dice, or I would make a concerted effort to be sure that they are somebody you want to go into business with and effectively marry, without the sex, probably, for 3, 4, 5 years.
Another one is, do you deal a lot with legal matters, say contracts? If so, is it mostly dealt with in-house?
Yes. So, I mean, contracts, we deal with employment contracts, we deal with kind of service agreements. There is a fair amount of legalese we do. I studied I did some kind of mercantile law in as an undergrad. But it's like law, the legal matters, paying lawyers is one of the things that I just cannot stand doing, because it's so expensive, and you end up, for the most part, like, it's all just a template. They're all just templates, essentially. Sure, there are some like things, but terms and conditions for a website, they're basically boilerplates. That's you go to a law firm and pay them $5,000 to Control F, change the last company name, and put yours in. So anyway, in initial stages, basically just copied other companies. Our terms and conditions to start off with were a big websites that we just changed and made our own. As we've sort of grown up a bit, we've used our actual lawyers more and more, particularly for kind of, you can get away with it, I think, for some things, but for important founding documents, shareholders agreements, for that sort of thing, you really do need to have a professional do it. If for nothing else, then there is somebody who's accountable if there's something wrong. But what I would say to that is, there are now a lot of platforms. Well, I say a lot. There are now platforms like Seed Legals or others, which, for very low fee, very low cost, are kind of built for startups to help them do a funding round, or to develop a founders agreement, or that sort of thing, which you can get done for kind of a couple of $100, to the standard of a law firm that you would pay $2,000. So I think that makes it a lot easier. Aislin, you're muted, I think.
That it would be helpful if I had my microphone on. I was saying, I'm looking through our questions. I don't see any new ones, but we'll give it a few more minutes. And if there's any last overview information you want to share with us in terms of when we think of changes in recruitment right now, what we should be thinking of.
Changes in recruitment. Yeah, I think we've gone through a lot from the employee perspective. I'm optimistic about kind of our ability to figure this out and get through the other side. I'm also like, I think we have no idea what the post-COVID world is going to look like, and I think it's been good for us because we're kind of used to using Zoom and video calls and working remotely, and I think this whole crisis and navigating from a work perspective has been like a real baptism of fire for the generations before us who were not, who were very much 9 to 5 in the office. And I think that behavior is going to persist coming out the other side. I think we're discussing whether or not we're going to keep an office after this. Why the company for the most part has been operating fine without all going into to the center of London. Why don't we get a house in Spain for the summer and go and work there, for example? I think the way that we work in a number of sectors, particularly in not the places that we operate in as a company, but that's kind of us as a corporate and the other places where you work, are going to be fundamentally different on the other side. And it's an exercise to think about what that looks like.
I have another question is, how do you integrate empathy with your brand, and how important will that be in the post-COVID world?
How do you integrate empathy? Well, I mean, I want to say, I think we strive to be the most empathetic kind of brand company doing what we're doing. And part of that is, a lot of our competitors or sort of other companies in this space really treat the candidates like shit and send them through 100 hoops where they're just trying to harvest data of them to remarket to them. We actively try and we actively work to provide the best possible candidate experience, where a lot of others are working to provide extract as much revenue from the employer side. What does that look like? We have a kind of you can call somebody on a phone to speak to a human, which is just quite rare in a lot of the kind of tech space now, to help you with your profile. A lot of people, particularly kind of the older workforce who are still working, just don't really know how to use a computer. So we're on hand to help with that. There's an intercom thingy on the site where you can have a live chat with somebody. We produce resources to provide advice as much as possible. So I'd like to think that comes from like our founding ethos, which was we're building this company to help people. We're not a parody of the kind of like make the world a better place thing. Like we want to build a business, but we set out to do this to help people who we thought had been neglected by tech. So I think that's kind of woven into the company's ethos from its kind of founding story.
We have one question that hasn't come up before, which is, do you do any work on environmental sustainability or measure any metrics with clients, etc.?
No, I mean, we strive to be as I'm a big fan of the green movement. Here's my Extinction Rebellion top. But as a company, we don't have a particularly large environmental impact. Obviously, we recycle, and everybody has their water bottle. We don't have plastic water in the office, but travel is by train within the UK. We don't have, it's with limited time and competency, it's not an area of our customers' businesses that we have strived to have an impact on, at least not at this stage.
And I think we got everyone's question in. Thank you very much, Matt, for taking the time, waking up very, very early to chat with us. Thank you as well to John and Hannah at SBS for facilitating all of this. I believe Matt's email was in the presentation. It's matt@inploi.com if you're interested in what he's working on and want to get in touch.
Yeah, thanks a lot for having me, Aislin. Really nice to chat. Thank you all for dialing in. I hope that was interesting or useful or something. And please reach out, connect with me on LinkedIn, send an email. We'd love to connect and keep conversation going.
Great. Thank you.
Cool. See ya.